everybody, I'm Caryn Hartglass, and you're listening to It's All About Food. Thank you for being there. Thank you for caring. Thank you for joining me. Today, I want to talk about something that I'm concerned with, and I really think everyone on the planet should be concerned, and that's with H5N1, what we lovingly call bird flu. And I want to bring up a few things. I don't know if you remember, but when I first started this podcast back in 2009, one of my first guests was my friend and colleague and just a fantastic individual, Dr. Michael Greger. And we spoke, and I just want to quote one of the things he said back then in 2009. I like to reiterate the dates because we're now in 2024. Okay, he said, the H5N1 avian influenza virus, the reason we continue to be so concerned about it is because of the human lethality. The concern about swine flu is the human transmissibility. I'm adding here, back then, swine flu was getting a lot of press. So swine flu is very transmissible. In fact, it has infected over 1 million Americans, we estimate at this point, yet it is relatively mild. It has only killed a few hundred people. Bird flu, the H5N1, is really the opposite. It's only infected hundreds of people. Remember, this is 2009. It's only infected hundreds of people, but it has killed over half of the people it has infected. The case fatality rate is about 60%, and in Indonesia, the hottest spot, more like 80%. So you don't even get a coin toss as to whether or not you lived through this disease. So that's why we're always concerned about H5N1. And of course, right now, the worst case scenario would be that H1N1 swine flu reassorts, recombines with the H5N1 bird flu. Okay, that was back in 2009, little concern. And now I want to quote from different governmental organizations and what they say about it today on their websites. So the HWO, the World Health Organization. How does H5N1 influenza spread to people? Almost all cases of H5N1 infection in people have been associated with a close contact with infected live or dead birds, or H5N1 contaminated environments. The virus does not infect humans easily, and spread from person to person appears to be unusual. There is no evidence that the disease can spread to people through properly prepared and thoroughly cooked food. H5N1 infection in humans can cause severe disease and has a high mortality rate. If the H5N1 virus were to change and become easily transmissible from person to person while retaining its capacity to cause severe disease, the consequences for public health could be very serious. And I'm adding here, that's if. The musical I just finished up this past weekend, there was this one song, if. If only this and if only that. But I digress. The CDC says about avian flu in mammals. There's a lot of acronyms here. HPAI, highly pathogenic avian influenza. Just remember that. A multi-state outbreak of HPAI, highly pathogenic avian influenza, H5N1 bird flu in dairy cows was first reported on March 25th, 2024. This is the first time that these bird flu viruses were found in cattle. CDC confirmed one human highly pathogenic avian influenza infection, H5N1, that had exposure to dairy cattle in Texas that were presumed to be infected with the virus. While thought to be rare, this exposure to HPAI, a H5N1 bird flu virus, is the first instance of likely mammal to human transmission. In the United States, since 2022, the USDA has reported HPAI, a H5N1, a virus detections in more than 200 mammals. 200 mammals. Okay, we're not just talking about birds to cows. We're talking about 200 other mammals. I'm gulping here. Okay, just a few more, and then I'm going to have a nice discussion with one of my favorite people on the planet. Okay, from factcheck.org, talking about H5N1, they say that widespread appearance of the viral genetic material in grocery store milk indicates that the virus is likely more prevalent in cows than cow testing data indicate. The virus has been detected in dairy milking cattle in 42 herds in 9 states, according to the USDA, and has been spreading among cows both within herds and between herds as cows are transported. And I love this. The CDC also recommends a few general precautions. These include keeping one's distance from wild birds and avoiding contact with substances like bird poop that could be contaminated. I'm taking note here because I have pigeons visit my terrace daily. Pigeons also, are they considered wild, or are they just our urban neighbors? People should also avoid contact with sick or dead animals, whether domestic or wild, and look into policies for reporting dead birds in their area. Researchers suggest keeping pets away from animals that could be infected, including in urban areas. Gulp. The CDC also recommends following normal food safety practices, such as properly cooking poultry, eggs, and beef, and avoiding raw milk and raw milk products. Finally, the agency says that it's important to get annual seasonal flu shots. If a person is infected with an ordinary human flu virus and becomes infected with H5N1 at the same time, the viruses could mix together and undergo reassortment, potentially leading to a virus better positioned to replicate in people. Okay. Did I want to add any more here? I think that's enough for the time being. Now, I want to bring on Robert Grillo, the founder of Free From Harm and also Slaughter Free Network, to have a conversation about this. Just to remind you about Robert Grillo, as an activist for all species, including the human ones, Robert Grillo has played the role of thought leader as well as frontline activist, leading campaigns, large-scale protests, and other creative actions since 2012. He has learned as much from academia as he has from the streets, from firsthand experience in grassroots activism. Most figures involved in social change are either academics on the theory side or activists on the practice side. Rarely do you find those who engage equally in both the theory and application, providing a unique perspective that bridges that gap between the two important sides of every movement. Grillo is also founder and director of Free From Harm, a nonprofit dedicated to advancing a plant-based food system and challenging the dominance of animal agriculture since 2009. He founded Slaughter Free Network in 2018 with the intent of building a powerful grassroots base and carrying out dramatic and innovative actions to capture the attention of media, public, and food industry power holders. Robert, I love all the work that you've been doing, grassroots at its best. So maybe you want to comment on a few of the things I just mentioned, and then we can go from there. Thank you for being here in this moment.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always fun to talk to you, and I always enjoy our catch-ups. And so, yeah, this subject of bird flu and how it's been evolving is something that we have been paying close attention to for over 2 years now, since one of the first huge outbreaks in a farm in Wisconsin with 3 million egg-laying, well, we don't call them egg-laying hens because that defines them as just machines, egg machines, but I typically like to say hens that lay eggs. But 3 million hens that in an egg factory farm in Wisconsin. By the way, owned by a rich Republican, probably a billionaire, who wanted to, prior to this big outbreak on his farm, wanted had applied for a permit to expand twice as big to 6 million hens. And the communities were not happy about this expansion idea. And yet the cities and counties responsible approved his expansion plans prior to this outbreak. And then we watched the way the USDA handled this disaster very closely. We actually had a drone pilot go out on site. We had activists from Madison and Milwaukee driving around trying to figure out what was going on. And contrary to the USDA's policy that they have to mitigate the outbreak within 24 to 48 hours, it took weeks to see any sign of any birds coming out of this factory farm. And after about, this is almost, I'm just giving you this anecdote to kind of set the stage, but I'm getting through it here. After only about 3 weeks, did you start seeing open dump trucks and workers from our drone seeing dump truck after dump truck of birds being dumped into these trucks and hauled to a mass grave site, which was not far from the homes of, some rural people in the area that have well water, that rely on well water, and that's their only source of water. And so you can imagine the dismay, the disaster that they're seeing unfold in front of them, and not getting answers from the state Department of Agriculture or Natural Resources, Department DNR, they call it. And we were looking for answers too, and we were frantically calling the state veterinarian to get more details. So what generally happened there was a complete botched effort to kill 3 million hens. They told the media and the public that they had the situation completely under control. And yet, they must have tried many different methods to kill these birds. And nothing must have been working well, because if it was so efficient and so if ventilation shut down and the gases they were using was so efficient in killing these birds so quickly and painlessly, why did it took over 3 weeks. And then, of course, the whole issue with disposal. You can only imagine 3 million birds. Where do you bury these birds to not create a biohazard site? So that's just one personal experience I had with bird flu very early on, a firsthand experience of seeing an actual outbreak unfold and how the government handled it. It was absolutely a fiasco.
When did this happen again?
This was in 2002, and I want to say March. It was one of the earlier outbreaks. It was when some of the big outbreaks were one of the first of many big outbreaks. There was another big one in Rembrandt Farms in Iowa that was like 5.3 million hens. And we started hearing about these really massive outbreaks. And that was one of the first ones.
Oh, and we haven't learned much in 22 years.
Well, let's go back even further than that, because if we really look at influenza viruses, we'd have to go back 4,500 years to trace the fact that most of the flu viruses that humans have contracted come from domesticating birds, domesticated fowl, domesticating chickens and ducks and turkeys. A lot of the data we have on flu viruses comes from our domestication.
I read
Nothing.
before what the CDC recommends for us to do, like cooking our meat, pasteurizing our milk. My dad, he died in 2017, but he had lots of wonderful expressions. And one of our favorites was, if you can't solve the problem, eliminate the problem. And clearly, the problem that needs to be eliminated is animal agriculture. We call factory farms. They need to go because the problem is from concentrating animals in a small area, which tends to be filthy and a great place for germs. Yeah.
I love your dad's expression, because in this case, I would add, not only should we eliminate it, but we can easily, there's an easy solution. It's not like a difficult solution, like with the energy sector, where how do we transition to renewable energies that are cost effective, that we can afford, that, well, no, that's a big problem, right? Because how do we do that? Many complex issues there. But with the food system, one of the areas that we've seized on is the bailout money, the subsidies, what some people will call subsidies. But the money that goes into bailing out animal agriculture, if we even were to cut back on that a fraction, or let's say 20-30%, it would have an enormous impact on the industry. If we just stop bailing the industry out, we could do an enormous good to solve this particular kind of problem and all the other problems that animal agriculture contributes to.
Okay, I want to add here, and I'm going to speak for you and myself. Our major concern with this has to do with the animals. Okay, we care about the animals. We care about the animals suffering from birth till death. We care that they are killed in a horrific and painful way. We care about that. And we would rather that these animals are not raised for food and that they were able to live in the wild and have their families and friends. Okay, that's number one. But I'm bringing this up because I want to turn the heat up. I want to turn the urgency up, because we are very aware that this H5N1 variety of influenza can morph and turn into a pandemic like we have never seen. And we just saw one that was not pleasant. And everything is pointing to this is going to happen. It's just pointing to it. We already know that this strain is deadly to humanity. 60% chance of dying, as Dr. Greger says. So we haven't seen in the United States more than allegedly one case. But at any moment, we don't know. And it just doesn't look good. So I would hope that people would be concerned about their own survival, especially after experiencing a pandemic. I mean, I'm shaking everybody.
A pandemic, which, by the way, we didn't anticipate, nor were we prepared for, right? So, like, it's not a problem until it's a problem, and you can reassure the public so much that, oh, it's really, the risk is very low right now. It's a low risk until it's not. And then all of a sudden, there's a trigger of that, which is what happened with COVID-19. And then all of a sudden, the control mechanisms for how to control a pandemic are out the window, because we didn't listen to the experts years ago, decades ago, about the potential and the threat of COVID-19, which is another, corona type virus that they've been warning about for decades. Same thing with different strains of bird flu. By the way, H5N1, not an epidemiologist, full disclosure, but it's just one of many bird flu viruses that experts are concerned about. And yes, they're excellent at mutating and finding clever ways to evade our control. And so, yeah, we have a really big problem on our hands. And the most galling thing about this for me is that instead of trying to mitigate this problem, the policy on bird flu, which the current administration has, is to reward the industry, literally reward the industry for spreading bird flu by bailing them out, by paying for, American taxpayers, hardworking Americans, paying for the disaster that the industry created. Not only paying to get rid of the dead animals, diseased dead animals, the millions, not only paying for sanitizing with toxic chemicals their factory farms so that they can start up business again, but also paying for the millions of chicks from the hatchery. So the hatchery gets to make money again too. It's good for them. This bird flu outbreak is great for the hatcheries because they are getting millions and millions of more chicks orders from it. And we're all paying for this. So that's the huge galling thing that I think Americans on all sides of the political spectrum would probably agree that hardworking Americans, everyday people, should not be paying for a problem that this industry created and is spreading.
So Tom Vilsack is once again our USDA secretary. I wish Biden didn't bring him back after Obama, but oh well. How do you feel he is handling this situation? And you've quoted him in some of your organization's mailings. He's aware. He knows what's going on. What does he think we need to do?
What I just described is his policy in a nutshell. And he's been 13 years in this position, and he will probably retire at the end of this term. And the most frightening thing for us right now is that him and Debbie Stabenow, who's the chairwoman of the Senate Agriculture Committee, the most powerful person in Congress, working on the Farm Bill, are both probably retiring at the end of this term. And what they want more than anything is the legacy of having passed a Farm Bill. They are willing to negotiate away anything for that end goal.
Wow.
They're willing to give the industries, the animal industries, what they want, if only to get a Farm Bill passed. And so now is the time that if we're going to have a voice, even if it doesn't make a difference, even if it doesn't dramatically change the Farm Bill, if we don't stand up now to have a voice, we might as well never do it, because this is the moment.
There have been a lot of programs over the years, conversations about the Farm Bill and the things that we need to do. And it's a mammoth bill. And it's difficult to be heard. But some movements have made headway. So you're having a program at the end of the month where people can get together and talk about the Farm Bill and what you want to do. What's that about?
Yeah, we're having a workshop coming up in May 23rd, how to take action on the Farm Bill. And I just want to say, to go back to something you said, a lot of people a lot of groups in our movement don't do much on this kind of activism or focus on the Farm Bill because they think it's just too mammoth and it's too difficult to work on. But an easy way to understand what the Farm Bill is, because there are so many tentacles and there's so many areas to it. It's a huge piece of legislation with all these different parts. A good way to look at it is to use the expression that the government actually uses, which is, it's a safety net. Doesn't that sound like a wonderful euphemism? A safety net for the agriculture industry. Um, well, yes, it certainly is. That's a very good way to look. It's a safety net. In other words, what are Americans going to pay for in terms of food production? Where is the support going to come from? Are we going to put it into almonds and fruits and vegetable crops, or are we going to put it into dairy, eggs, and meat industry? And so that's what this is about. Where's the funding going to go? And it's our money, right? So the workshop is about how Free from Harm is approaching this and how people can get involved by getting in front of their Congress reps, their congressional reps, and not just sending emails and phone calls, which are important to have the paper trail, right? But to get in front of them, because the only way you're going to get their attention on a dissenting view like we have about the Farm Bill and about trying to end animal subsidies is to get in front of these powerful decision makers. They are the ones that will vote on this or not. And if they don't vote on it, we won't be sorry, because it's a messed up farm bill right now, what's being proposed. One of the leading proposals is from Representative Thompson, who wants to basically do away with Prop 2 and any kind of animal protection that Prop 2 has, developed. And he's gaining ground. They have a meeting on May 23rd. There's going to be a congressional hearing. We want to be at that hearing, right? We have to be in the room, or we don't get our voices heard. So
where is that meeting, and how do you get in the room?
We don't know yet. We just found out about it. But this is the thing. We say we live in a democracy or in a free, some call it a free country, or the point here is, when it comes to our food system, these big decisions are being made behind closed doors. There are no public hearings. Absolutely none. The only people that get access to these congressional reps that are going to vote on the Farm Bill are industry lobbyists and industry journalists that have the money to pay for press conferences to get them in to talk. No one else gets a voice. And so we decided that's not good enough. And so we have been getting in front of these congressional reps at their town halls, at their press conferences, at their offices, wherever we can find them in person, without too high risk of not going into places that we are clearly can't get into. But yeah, that's the spirit of what we're trying to do.
So what you're doing is legal.
We have not experienced anyone getting arrested for, if anything, it would be there could be so we have the Democratic National Convention coming up in Chicago. That's going to be a huge event with a lot of protests, especially with the war in Israel and all the protests around that. There's going to be a huge people probably coming in from all over for those kinds of protests. But so the objective, though, is to not only to get in front of our big decision makers on the Farm Bill, but also to get media coverage, so that the media covers the fact that there is a dissenting voice view on this issue of the Farm Bill and bailing out animal agriculture, and maybe giving that money instead to plant-based solutions that need the money instead.
Can you talk about some of the meetings that you've been to recently where you did a little protest or got your message across, and how that worked out?
Yeah, one is very emblematic, I think, of how this whole thing functions in such a corrupt way. So we have a group in DC that attended, well, they went to a meeting. It was a press conference that was held by the American Farm Broadcasters Association. I believe that's the name. And so this group has the power and money to stage a press conference in the Capitol building and invite every major decision maker on the Farm Bill to speak, to do a press conference for 10 or 15 minutes each. And we knew Debbie Stabenow was on the agenda. And so we were going to go and confront her directly. So we had a group of activists. At first, they couldn't get in the room. We're told we can be in the hallways, but we can't be in rooms at the Capitol. Not sure where that's written, but the Capitol building, by the way, is a taxpayer-funded facility. We pay the salaries of everybody that works there. We pay for the maintenance of the building, the security, everybody. And so we didn't get it. One of our people got in, had a seat, started listening. After half an hour, was asked to leave.
Wow.
Okay. So that person left and said, I guess this is done. And then the group came back about a half hour later and got in. Security guards were distracted by something. They were able to get into the room. They confronted Stabenow. She was actually giving her little speech, and they did it. And then one of the journalists from Kentucky, an ag guy and a farmer too, for 40 years he's been an ag journalist, said, we would like to interview you guys.
Yay.
We'd like to get your review. So can you please come back in an hour? And I spoke to him too. But the funny part was they come back and there's several Capitol police officers guarding the door. And there's a guy from Congressional House Rep Thompson. Remember the guy who's anti-animal welfare, who wants to pass a farm bill that has cuts back on all these animal protection laws. One of his staffers is at the door with a big stick. We called him the stick man because this guy had a stick that was about as tall as him.
Oh gosh.
It wasn't a cane. It was a big stick
that could do harm.
He was kind of banging it on the ground in front of the door, and he looked like some kind of medieval guard.
Was this some kind of Franklin Delano Roosevelt speak softly and carry a big stick?
I didn't think of the analogy at the time, but maybe he was thinking that subconsciously. But it was pretty funny. I mean, for them, I don't think it was funny, but seeing the video of it afterwards, I think, and calling him the stick man, people were like, wow, that's pretty wild, to see something like that. But anyway, they told us that we couldn't come back, and Barbara was like, hey, this guy asked me back. And so the journalist came out and said, let's go down to the cafeteria and we'll do the interview down there. We'll, let's get around all this tension. And they did. And, but that's the kind of atmosphere that if you are an activist, or even just not an activist, but an everyday person who's curious about how does the Farm Bill work, you're probably going to confront a lot of obstacles to entry and access. If you're not a lobbyist and you're not a big ag journalist, you're probably not going to get anywhere unless you're really willing to stage an action and just go in without permission.
Of course, this is infuriating.
Yeah.
Because we're supposed to be in a democracy. These people are supposed to be acting for us, representing us, and we have no voice. And this has happened throughout history, of course. And what needs to happen is organizations like Free From Harm and Slaughter Free Network, why the work that you're doing is so important. And I really want to see more people following what you're doing and getting involved, because it's all about numbers. When there are enough of us who are screaming loudly enough, we'll be heard. And there are many animal welfare and animal organizations that really are doing nothing about this.
First, let me just say, yes, I think, speaking truth to power is part of a resistance tradition that goes back hundreds of years and is something that has proven results. It works. It's powerful. It captures the attention. It builds popular support. It does work. It has worked in lots of other movements too. And I think we're drawing on and honoring that tradition, that protest tradition, which I think is there's a lot of power to it. And you hit on the other point, which another reason why we're doing this is because as a movement, we're basically missing in action on the big decisions and the big power brokers, like Senator Debbie Stabenow, like Secretary Bill Sack, like House Rep Thompson, who have versions of the Farm Bill that they are ready to push through Congress. On May 23rd, they're going to have a hearing, and they want to get this through before the end of their terms. Okay, so before the end of the year. The other groups that are doing Farm Bill work, I have spoken to some of them, and I think they're incredible. Some really talented and incredible people, and I honor their work and respect their work greatly. And they're doing a different kind of work. They're doing an inside game type of work where they're trying to work within the existing power structure to try to make some change that way. Whereas we're working on the outside, trying to put pressure on the system from the outside using more of a people-powered movement. And it's a different approach. I think both can coordinate and complement each other. But they are both absolutely essential. And the outside game approach is missing in action.
Yeah,
which is why we're doing
definitely.
this.
I think the people inside would be more effective if there were people on the outside making the organizations uncomfortable, and then they could go to the people that they're a little more comfortable with and say, what do you recommend to get these people our backs? What do we need to do?
That's absolutely dead on. I mean, there's actually been empirical studies about how the radical flank effect opens the doors for the moderate flank, not just in our movement. I'm saying in social justice movements in general. I'll say that again. The radical flank that makes big demands and takes bold action opens the door to negotiation for the moderate flank. They rarely ever appreciate that fact. They tend to think that it was their wheeling and dealing that did it, and rarely want to take credit or give credit to others in the movement. Some are really good, though, that we're working with and do understand how we're opening doors for them.
I can't underline enough or say enough how I think the work that you're doing is important, so important. And I wish more people were doing it, more organizations were doing it, and maybe some momentum will happen soon, because I don't think enough change is happening. I know I've been frustrated because I'm not going to mention any names, but I was reviewing a book to promote on this program, and halfway through it, I just couldn't. And there were a lot of recommendations on what we need to do as vegans. And some of them were okay, but some of them I just didn't agree with. Because I believe more in what you're doing. I believe more in grassroots. I believe more in changing the mindset of the culture rather than making these little baby steps here and there, getting a Beyond Burger in somebody's mouth. I think we need to make big changes, big action, if we really want to see something happen. And it's frustrating because the movement's been around for decades. It started with grassroots. the changes happen. We talked about this before. The changes happen from grassroots, and then these organizations, some of them weren't big in the beginning, but they became big and they have a lot of financial support, and they're just not doing enough, or they're not, in my opinion, doing what needs to be done.
Let me frame this in a way that kind of complements what you say, but offers maybe. So what I see is that when we get into an intellectual debate about what strategies and tactics work best, I think we end up talking too much about stuff and not doing. And what I see in the grassroots is not an intellectual debate, but it's the spark, it's the drama, it's the thing that the public responds to because it's emotive, it's visceral, it's everyday working person relatable. And it's not an intellectual exercise. It's the spark that creates the popular support that a movement needs to succeed. It's not, we can intellectuals advocacy and say, well, this approach is good and there's 90% efficiency rate and 100 million animals are saved every hour we do this work. We can look at those kind of data points or metrics, but we're losing sight of the grassroots culture when we get too in the woods about data. Yeah, we don't need to really go down. I don't think we really need to focus on that because it just ends up in debates and inaction, which is largely what we're seeing, a lot of inaction. I love there's one quote from Sarah Schulman, who was very active in the ACT UP movement and has now, written a book about ACT UP from the perspective of 30 key people that drove the movement. Because she wrote this book because she felt like the media got it wrong, and the story they told about the ACT UP movement was completely wrong, and that ACT UP needs to be told by the people who actually led it. And one of the things she says in the book, which I love, is just get out there. Stop debating tactics and strategies. Just get out there and create actions that fire up people and get them to want to get involved. And then from those actions, you can inform your strategies and plan moving forward. Let those actions guide you. And I think that's brilliant. And that's what we're trying to do right now, because we see this big opportunity and time window with the Farm Bill. And we're getting the word out there. We got Tom Vilsack to admit that killing millions of birds is not the way they want to move forward. It's not the solution. So we're starting to change the narrative, at least, on this whole issue of the bird flu and what to do about it.
It's a very challenging situation. And I say that sincerely, even though it can also sound a bit sarcastic. But most of the world is online. Most of the world is connected to social media. It's not like we're meeting in small communities and doing things face to face. We learn about things online. We learn about things from memes. And I'm amazed at what has happened with all the protesting with the universities against the war in Israel. I don't want to go into the specifics there, but a button was pushed and people are responding. And I don't know that most of the people who are responding with protests or whatever they feel they need to do really understand what's happening. And it's hard to, I don't know what's happening. I'm not there on the ground. It's really hard to understand everything about it. It's a terrible situation, and I'm not going to go
Yeah.
any more about it, but it has hit a button. And I hope we can come to some solution at some point peacefully.
Yeah.
But the thing is, how do we get a movement going in this world today with social media and memes effectively and work as grassroots? It's just amazing that these protests have happened, but I don't know how to do it for the animals.
Well, all of our actions, we try to get as much footage. We try to, broadcast our work online on all the platforms, the social platforms where people are engaging on. So we're bringing it to them. And what we're doing is modeling. What we're trying to do is model actions that other people can take and say, I can do that. I've never done that, but I want to do that. That's brave. That's courageous. That's what needs to be said. Yes, I want to do that. I think some of our actions have, but based on what we see in terms of responses, I think we're inspiring more people to want to take this kind of bolder action. And I think that's where things start, because look at what, if you look at like the suffragette movement, and a lot of people say, well, we need so many more people, and this is such an insurmountable task. But, if you look at other movements, things are a little bit more optimistic, because the suffragettes had very few people that were willing to do direct action and take bold action, because they knew that they were putting their bodies on the line.
Yeah.
And it was actually going to result in harm to them. There were very few people that were willing to put themselves on the line like that. But there were some, and those became, I don't want to say just martyrs, but they became martyrs for sure, and symbols of a movement. The courage of a movement. People value courage.
Mm-hmm.
Do things that are courageous, and a movement can build on that. And they see the sacrifice that people are willing to make and say, I don't want don't give me an easy task. Give me something that means something. That's one thing I love about Marshall Gantz. He says, people don't ask volunteers to do easy stuff. They don't want easy. They want valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Give them value, and you will be amazed at what they're willing to do.
Okay. So what do we need to do now? Do we need to participate in your workshop coming up? We need to find out who our representatives are, find out who's involved with the Farm Bill, and communicate with them as best we can. What do we need to do?
Yeah, the workshop is great because it will lay out a plan for how you can engage your reps, your congressional reps on the Farm Bill, and with certain kinds of messages at certain kinds of events where you might get media attention, and you'll definitely get big audiences. And so, yeah, the workshop is a great place to start.
Okay, well, I'm thinking that's our focus. So who's ever listening, get on it. We want to get active with this Farm Bill. And if you don't know anything about it, Robert's workshop will help you. So I'll leave a link in this post for that.
Thank you.
You're
That would be
welcome.
great.
So we have a few more minutes. Anything else you want to share with us?
I'm doing gardening right now.
That's always good. It's time to garden. I see all the plants behind you.
That's my therapy. One of the things that keeps me sane is plants, indoors and outdoors.
What are you growing this year?
Today I just planted some native butterfly weed in the backyard. Very small backyard, but native butterfly weed, which is in the milkweed family, but it has these beautiful orange clusters of blooms that are amazing.
And great for beneficial insects, right?
beneficial insects as well as uh, the monarchs. And
Right.
yeah, great. So I just planted some of those this morning, and I had to put little cages around them to protect them from the critters that want to eat them.
That's nice. Of course, I don't have very much space. We have a terrace, and I started planting about 6 weeks ago in little pots on the windowsill that gets a lot of sun. And now that I finished my show, I'm going to replant them outdoors. But I'm very excited. I have classic herbs, basil and
Yeah,
peppermint. And I've got some onions growing, a couple of kinds of onions and peppers. And I don't know why I did this, but we got cantaloupe seeds. And so we've got this cantaloupe plant. I don't know where it's going to go because, you kind of need space for that. But a long
yeah.
time ago, I used to compost on the terrace and then take the dirt and put it in my plants. And from that, a cantaloupe once grew. I didn't know it, but it was hanging over the terrace. And then one day I was like pulling it up the vine, and there was a little baby cantaloupe on the end of it. So I can grow cantaloupe on the terrace.
Wow, that's cute. I'm glad that didn't end up on somebody's head in some level below.
Yeah, right? Liability. And in my basil seeds, there was a mysterious leaf popping up amongst the other basil leaves. And I kind of recognized it, but it didn't look like basil. And I used one of those apps to identify it. And it's either broccoli or cabbage. I'm like, oh, bonus. Some wrong seed got mixed up in my basil seed.
Very cool.
Yeah, so these are things we need to be excited about. Growing our own food and plants. It's something
Definitely.
that feels good, brings us joy. I think there's something in our DNA that likes doing that because we're supposed to be doing it.
Yeah, right.
Right.
It's one way to reconnect a little bit with nature when you're living in an urban environment like we are.
Right. Okay, well, once again, Robert Grillo, I'm bowing my head. I love what you're doing. You deserve much more attention. You deserve much more financial support in order to expand and explode and get this very important message out. So I'm like sending you good wishes and vibes, and thank you again for being with me on It's All About Food today.
Well, Caryn, right back at you. Positive vibes. Love what you do. You're a great person. Follow you on social media, you and Gary, and all the antics and adventures that you guys are always on. I'm gonna join you sometime when I get to New York.
I can't wait because there's so much good eating here.
Great. Yeah, I look forward to it.
Okay, Robert Grillo, the founder of Free From Harm and Slaughter Free Network. Thank you for being again, and thank you for joining me today. Have a great day.
Thank you, Caryn. Take care.
You've been listening to It's All About Food, a podcast that I have been broadcasting since 2009. And if you're new to It's All About Food, I want to let you know a few things. One is, obviously, we talk about food. I promote a whole food, plant, vegan diet. And we have many people on this program who talk from all different kinds of perspectives when it comes to food: health, environment, animals, society, food scarcity, politics, food distribution, toxins in food when it comes to industrial food and processed food. The list is endless, and there's always things to talk about when it comes to food, which is why I called this podcast It's All About Food. We have archived all of the programs since 2009 on our nonprofit website, responsibleeatingandliving.com, and I invite you to visit that website for recipes, and perhaps you want to go back in time and listen to some of the older podcasts. I would say for the most part, since 2009, not much has changed. So when you're going to a podcast about health, all of that information is as true as it ever has been. We're continually learning from science that a whole food plant diet is the best for human health, longevity, and quality of life. But sometimes we don't talk about health on this show. Sometimes we talk about the environment. Sometimes we talk about animals, as we did in this particular program. That's where I'm coming from. I got into this when I was a teenager. I became a vegetarian. I didn't want to kill animals. And the more I learn about it, the more I am convinced this is the best way to live. I don't want to say the right way to live. I don't want to get all judgmental. In my opinion, it's the best way to live. Why not eat in a way that nourishes your body in the best way possible to feel good? People talk about, oh, I don't want to live forever if I'm not going to feel good. That's what this lifestyle and diet does, is helps you have quality of life for as long as possible. And we're living in a very strange environment. And I really believe that if more people adopted a vegan diet and a whole food vegan diet, so many problems would disappear. Chronic diseases would go to very, very small amounts. And all over the world, we wouldn't have so much tension and violence. So many things are connected to food, eating the right food, food scarcity, and last but not least, we would not be harming so many sentient beings. If you're new to eating vegan and you just found this podcast, I welcome you to email me anytime, info@realmeals.org. I am happy to answer your questions. And if you've been around for a long time, I'm bowing my head. It's hard to bow your head and speak into the microphone. But thank you. The message from this podcast today is really important to me, and I hope you realize its importance, and perhaps you will share it with people that may not care about eating a vegan diet. They might care about a pandemic that is lethal to the human race. Maybe. I would hope so. Thanks for listening. This has been another episode of It's All About Food. Everyone have a delicious week.